See how we go. Not the ideal environment for recording. Not the better recording environment.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, fire away, guys.
Well, Kim asked a question, and I said I won't answer until we're all together.
What was it?
And that was about coming out to Australia and participating in God's Way.
Yeah. When's the best time to come? Is this any time of the year?
Well, obviously during the southern winter months, Mary and I won't be there. So from about May to about September, we will be in the northern hemisphere probably. So if you're hoping to catch up with us, then don't come that time because otherwise we'll be not there. But aside from that, really the whole year they're running projects every week. There's projects happening. And there's things happening there all the time. So really, you can come any time of the year. And it really just depends a bit on whether you also want to catch up with us or not as well. So for us, we are there, well, for the most part, we'll probably be there from about November through to around about February, perhaps, potentially.
This coming year.
This year?
Yeah, this coming
period.
Yeah.
This coming period. And then probably in March we're going to be doing a bit of a road trip in some places in Australia. And then April we'll be back at our normal home again. And then late May, so we'll have 2 months and then we're off again around doing we'll be in Portugal, then UK, Canada, and
in terms of the weather, it gets very hot in December, January. So 40 degrees Celsius in the middle of the day.
105 or thereabouts or more.
Yeah. And it's quite hot. And the sun is different in Australia as well. So if you're coming in those months, just make sure you bring good sun protection. But it's easier if you're going to camp or sleep out because it's very comfortable and it gets a bit cooler at night usually. So, and the mid-seasons are also fine, but even winter doesn't get very cold. So
you guys will be
fine.
Whatever time you come, you'll be fine for it. Yeah. Here in San Diego or on the West Coast, it does get up to about 100 degrees at times, doesn't it? In the summer?
I imagine it's quite similar. We were looking at the rainfall here. It's actually less rainfall in San Diego than there is where we live. So
yeah, you only get about 10 inches a year here, I think. We get about 20. Most of our rain occurs in summer. So most of yours will occur in winter, I gather.
Yes.
but if you are thinking of coming out, I recommend, it's up to you, you can come for how long or short you want to come, but I would give it at least a month to really let yourself have some experiences and work on different emotional issues. That, 2 months is also really good because you get quite a few possibilities to engage with projects and get feedback and work on stuff, and actually see some of your efforts have some results as well.
You can get a tourist visa in Australia for 3 months, I think.
So where's the closest to get around? Does it have to be Brisbane or?
No, I think you can do it more. But a lot of people find it's better financially. Sorry. A lot of people find it more economically what am I trying to say? It's cheaper to buy a car and sell it at the end if you're going to be there for a month or two.
Well, not really.
Yeah.
No, but some people have done that and stay for a longer period. But don't know.
You'd have to investigate it, but I think that's what they found. She was young.
3 months.
Depending on the type of car you have.
The nearest place to hire a car is really Brisbane.
probably arrange a collection in Kingroy and drop off, but
Possibly, but you've still got to get back to Brisbane to get out anyway. So it'd be cheaper to hire in Brisbane and drop it off back in Brisbane. Yeah.
but the roads are very rural, so it's unsealed roads. We live on an unsealed road, so it's
So
very.
people are forgiving with regard to driving.
Probably more than they are here in San Diego. But I don't know. I think after a while you get used to driving on any side of the road anyway. It's not. We do both on these trips. We obviously drive on both sides of the road, and it's not a big problem.
You get used to it.
You get used to it.
How's the medical?
There are some different laws.
How's the medical or health? Like, I'm just imagining if someone would have an emergency situation.
Yeah.
How does it?
Well, there's 40 kilometres, which is about 25 miles to the nearest place where you can get help.
And insurance based or?
No,
No.
we have free public health care in Australia.
Yeah.
But we probably recommend people get
Some kind of
some
travel.
kind of travel insurance.
And we require everybody who's a participant to get some kind of insurance on themselves. But very quickly cost is this going to happen?
No, I think he's loading up for our marketing. So he's going to be just loading us off our marketing.
And when we say it's free public health care, I think if you're a foreign citizen, you might have to pay something. So.
Yeah.
When you mentioned about camping out, is that on the God's Way property or somewhere nearby?
There's a lot of people around. Friends of ours, you could say, I suppose, who have 40 or 80 acre properties, and many of them are happy to have someone stay with them outside. Some are even happy to bill it, but only after they get to know you. So, we always recommend to them that we don't know you and they don't know you until they get to know you. They don't really know what a person's like, and so generally they wait a few weeks before they make that offer based on their assessment of what they feel you're going to do in their company,
But
how loving you're going to be.
Yeah, there are local campgrounds and stuff as well, but you really do need a vehicle because it's a drive to them as well.
Yeah. Like the two main properties that we work on are 5 kilometres apart from each other. So that's 3 miles apart from each other. Who have you been there? Like, so
But you
it
guys
was a
haven't
long time
come.
ago for you.
Yeah.
Long time ago for you.
2019.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was for an assistance group, but you haven't been, have you been out?
I pulled Mother of Millions
Oh, yeah, you do, that's right. It's the VSP.
in the VSP.
That's right.
That's right.
The short
I forgot.
stay.
Yeah, and makes it better. Yeah. So a lot of times it's about sort of connecting with people who've probably been out before. The God's like the directors of God's Way are not going to nurse you in any way.
That would be going against what we're
That would be
teaching.
going against what we're teaching. So it's but you'll find a lot of generosity. So just wait for it. Sorry.
Yeah, we were talking about that, but we haven't really been invited to use that space, so.
Yeah, this is the only space we've been invited to use. But this is where the person who make the suggestions need to be more careful of their suggestions. Does that make sense, Jake? I know you're very enthusiastic for us to be somewhere, but when there's this much noise around, it's just pretty much impossible. Yeah. So this is where we find people who organise our venues for us are very inconsiderate generally of what we need in a venue, and this is why frequently we have to sort out our own venues because the majority of people are very considerate about what is required to have a good venue for talking with each other.
And often it's experience as well.
Yeah.
You don't really know what to think about until you've done it a few times.
Yeah, but you were involved in our selection process, so you do know what the requirements are.
True.
You just haven't applied them to this venue. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mind you, it's given us an opportunity to talk to the
To the past.
pastor, which we did for the last hour before we came.
Can I just say about God's way as well? We encourage everyone to be self-responsible, or in fact we enforce that. So for your living arrangements and your transport and all of those things, that's down to everyone to arrange for themselves.
Yeah.
There is, as Jesus said, often generous people around who are happy to host you as long as they feel like you're going to treat them and their property with respect and care. But I should also mention that your participation is not guaranteed. It's dependent on you being humble and wanting to look at the feedback that's given. So you might decide to come for a month, but you might be there for 2 days and then...
Or 5 minutes.
5 minutes, and you're usually given multiple opportunities to go away and deal with the feedback. But if it shows over time that you're really not wanting to engage with it, then we say it's not going to work. You need to really make some shifts before you come back and participate. So just so you know that up front, you might be there for 6 days or 6 weeks or 6 months. It just really depends on your personal sincerity. Yeah.
I just had a question. I was wondering how it went with the pastor. How did that conversation go? I'm curious.
Yeah, it was a funny conversation. He's very unlike many of our pastors we would normally meet in the sense that he wasn't attacking us really in any way. It's a bit condescending, but not really attacking. And but he asked us a whole heap of questions about that, which he didn't give us the opportunity to completely answer. But we managed to answer briefly on all the questions he asked, which were a large variety of questions.
Yes, he asked a lot of things.
About the Bible and about different things that happen in the Bible and about our first century life
And the nature of God. God's a triune God.
yeah,
And
the nature of God.
we talked about men and women and equality,
Religions.
the Gospels, what was right in the Bible, what's not right in the Bible. And Shane had obviously introduced us a bit, which is, yeah, which was good.
Very sweet.
Yeah. Yeah. But he certainly didn't project any, what did I say?
Please let us use the space.
Yes, yes.
Which the average minister would not do.
And I think it's the first pastor or minister who's, well, I've known you, ever had a conversation with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you do this in other churches, or have you done this in other churches?
No,
Churches,
I never.
we have approached church venues when I've been planning trips, and they all
Always.
say no, we can't meet, you can't meet. And that was his question. He said, well, wouldn't it be good, like, aren't Christians listening to you? And we said, no.
Yeah. So yeah, but it was an interesting conversation. It went for about an hour.
About an
We were there
hour.
for about an hour. So, as to, I can see a lot of things potentially happening in the future because of it, but not right now.
What do you mean by that?
Well, there are some religious leaders, of which a minister or a pastor would be included, who have a degree of openness about the truth. And then, while they may treat you condescendingly right now about what they've asked, at least they haven't closed the gate completely. And so in the future, when it becomes plain that we are the people we're claiming to be, it'll be interesting to see what they do with that. So who knows, one day we might be visiting his church upstairs. Have a chat with the congregation,
That's true.
which would be fun.
Yeah.
We'll do a belief discussion with the
The importance
congregation.
of belief, yeah.
So,
Have you guys done that before, like sports or competition?
Have you?
No, have you guys?
No. I have been invited to speak at different venues or events by groups of people. None of them have been of the Christian faith or of any specific faith. Perhaps except for New Age.
Yeah.
And usually, for the most part, they all go away pretty angry with me at the end of it. And so it's quite an interesting thing to do. To go to an event where everyone's enthusiastic about hearing from you at the beginning, and then as time goes on, they realise that so many of their belief systems and everything will be confronted, that by the time you end up at the end, it's sort of like they're so upset that often you're rarely, well, I've never been invited back to any of them, is the best way to put it.
I have a feeling some people, they have presented to congregations about divine truth, but they haven't, like they've been a member of a church and talked about it, but I
But
cannot
they haven't
remember
had
that
the
it's...
Jesus and Mary conversation, though, generally.
No, generally not. They're just trying to present the truths without talking about it.
What
Yeah.
about the Reverend? There was a Reverend in the weekend.
Oh no, he was very devious man, and he was a United Minister, Reverend. But his whole purpose for meeting with us was to expose us as cult leaders, and to have a big presentation on a similar to 60 Minutes.
Well, I'm
It's show
sure
on
you've
show.
seen it, yeah.
Same, I thought he came back and was more humble to
No, worse. It was worse. He was a very devious and malicious man,
Yeah,
which I said to Mary
at the beginning.
at the beginning he would be, and we expected it. So, but it was interesting. Also, how much they falsify everything as well, because he was a part of the people falsifying, our living circumstances, and Mary and I at the time. Even now, there's no one else living with us on our property, and he was saying we had a commune, and he said we had barbed wire fences around our commune, our community, and all that stuff. But it was just Mary and I, and he called our house the headquarters of Divine Truth, which I suppose it is. But it's a big stretch, And the media people.
And he's the one who said there's hidden cameras and their cameras were completely in the open. Everyone in the
We've
audience
actually
could see
got
them.
pictures of his
We've
cameras
got
in
footage
amongst
of
the
them
audience.
taking footage of us.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, he was a terrible liar, to be honest.
He was trying to make out that there was a lot of hidden things about us that is clearly not true. So.
Yeah, but his purpose for coming wasn't to discuss any doctrinal issues. His purpose was more to just try and give us a hard time in the community, really. The final presentation they did was shown to nearly 8 million, I think it was, people, or 6 million people, or something like that, in Australia, and we got thousands of death threats after that. Like, it was a bad week.
Is God infinite in size? And if so, does the universe somehow exist in the mind or body of God?
Well, you're presuming there that God's place of abode, shall we call it, is in a dimensional space that the universe exists in. So a person can be infinite in qualities and quantity, but actually live in a completely dimensional existence. You could say that the universe, which is one of God's creations, is a creation that God has full control over. But in terms of the space it occupies as to where that is, it's really unknown, like in terms of where it is in reference to God. We know for a fact that God existed before the universe did, because that otherwise he wouldn't have created the universe. And also he established the structure of law for the universe that it exists in. Now, as to where he did all of that, in terms of space and time, there is no reference, and I don't know whether any human will ever know what that reference would be. To my mind, it would be beyond our capability of even absorbing emotionally or intellectually understanding. So there are certain questions like that that are really difficult to answer. We can make suppositions, but our capacity to understand the truths is going to be dependent upon how much love we receive and how close we become to God in our own nature in order to understand. So there's things God can show you, and there's things Mary and I are being shown in a unique state, but we still don't understand. Does that make sense? And then to attempt to describe them is even more difficult. Because obviously if you don't understand them yourself, it's pretty much impossible to describe them to another person in order for them to understand them. But, you can ask God any question and God will attempt to show you the answer, but as to whether you have the capacity emotionally and intellectually to even understand the answer would be very dependent upon your development in love. And the more you discover, the more you realise how finite humans are in terms of, compared to the infinite God, how finite humans are. But even dimensional space, which is an existence in the universe itself, may not exist outside of that universe. We don't really know. And it's very hard to make suppositions about things that are obviously way beyond, mathematically way beyond human comprehension.
Do you have a theory or opinion yourself?
Yeah, I have some theories.
Would you like to share?
Probably not.
Okay.
Yeah. And mostly because in the past when I've shared theories, people take it as if I'm stating a fact, and I'm not. Obviously I've got opinions of my own about certain things that have yet to be established as fact to me. And as a result, I'm happy to share my opinions generally, but unfortunately in the past, every time I have, it's all been taken as if I've been stating facts when I've made it quite clear that they are just opinions only. And unfortunately, then people latch on to those things and then later on down the track say, oh, but he said this would happen or that would happen or this is how it is and now he's changed his mind. And I haven't really changed my mind about a lot of things actually. Almost everything that I've shared an opinion about in the past, I still have quite strong opinions about actually. But because I know they are not established even inside of me as fact, I'm tempted to not share them. So example is earth changes, I still feel they're going to happen. And I still feel they are going to be significant enough to cause major destruction. But, and there are two potential, you could say, causes for such things. One being human cause, so historically on Earth, this Earth has been through 4 cataclysmic changes to, as far as I've discussed it with other spirits. And at each time it was human caused cataclysm that caused major problems on Earth. And if you look at people like Elon Musk and Donald Trump and others like that, you can see that they are more and more darkly motivated to do scientific things that may, and there's many others around the earth that are in a similar condition, who are willing to do experiments on the very place we live, on Earth itself, to the detriment of all humankind, unfortunately. And these people frequently are getting spiritual downloads in their, when I say spiritual downloads, I don't mean from God, they're getting downloads from quite malicious and dark spirits to do or to engage the behaviour they engage only that the end result is obviously delicious to the earth itself and therefore to everyone on it. So, you know, this has commonly happened in history. You know, and like I said, there's been 4 events like that over the last 180,000 years, where humans have got into that state where they can do things that are extremely damaging to the earth and to the majority of life on it as well.
Was that the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs as well?
Well, that happened before humans existed on Earth. So I'm talking only about the ones since humans existed on Earth, and the majority of those have all been caused by humans. But there is a possibility of an asteroid hitting Earth at any time, of course, because we have an asteroid belt that is around our outer solar system, and of course the movement of those bodies in the asteroid system is very hard to determine because certain asteroids hit other asteroids, and as to how they hit them, if they start to enter an orbit around the sun, then obviously that's elliptical in nature, but then obviously there's the potential that one of those could hit Earth as well. But those things are very hard to predict as well. And so, but that being said, it could be that kind of an event or an event related to human activity that would cause damage to the Earth. And I still believe, and so do some of my spirit friends still believe, that it's possibly going to occur. Not necessarily, we don't know the probability. All we've felt from God is that there is a possibility.
So, asteroid, what kind of law of attraction does bring an asteroid to the Earth?
Well, it's funny how you guys talk about kind of law of attraction. There is only one law of attraction. So there's not different kinds of law of attraction. The law of attraction works on a physical level as well as a spiritual level. And the souls of humanity also have a bearing on the attractions and how they work. And that's the collective soul condition. However, very fortunately, the darker the condition of a person or a group of people, the less effect they end up having on heavenly bodies. So that means that the darker the earth gets, the less effect the people on earth have on the movement of bodies outside of the earth. Obviously, they have an effect on the earth itself, which can be quite devastating, but not necessarily an effect on the movement of heavenly bodies that might collect with the earth, you know, that may collide with the earth. And those things happen for lots of other reasons, and frequently they are to do with physical laws in operation all throughout the universe. And as you know, there's particles that humans can't see that also have an effect on the movement of heavenly bodies, both in the physical realm but also in the spiritual realm. And 95% of all matter is in the spiritual realm rather than the physical realm. So the majority, if you think about that, most of you look at the universe and go, wow, look how big it is, it looks infinite, right? And there are, like, obviously from a human's perspective, you know, huge amount of matter in the universe that we can see, but that's less than 5% of the actual matter that exists in the universe. So the majority of the matter exists in the spirit world rather than in the physical.
You're talking about heavenly bodies and matter, and I'm wondering about astrology and false beliefs and truth there.
Yep.
And I also have a practical question for Mary after.
Yeah, well, your soul is independent of any astrological movements. So that being said, you can see that your soul itself is really completely independent being. It's the most powerful of all the creations of God. So it's more powerful than the universe in the sense that the universe itself constrains it by law, but every physical thing in the universe has less power than the soul actually has on an individual level. So even the sun, our sun, has less power than a unified soul, right? In terms of its power, the energy output, its ability to change things. And so even huge physical bodies have less power than the soul. So that, if you bear all that in mind, you can see straight away that what happens on a physical level has little bearing on the soul. So this whole concept that, you know, astrology, when you were born in time, and all of these things has much of an effect on your actual soul, is a very, like, it doesn't take into account the soul itself and its creation. Of course, there are things that do control what happens on the physical level. And certainly what happens in astrological bodies do affect you physically. An example of that is that usually women's menstruation cycles match the gravitational pulls that are upon a body. So things like, you know, the moon's rotation determine the menstrual cycle, for example, things like that. So obviously, on a physical level, there are many things that are determined by physical interactions, but not to do with the soul. Does that make sense?
Yes. See, then that, since the talk in Nova Scotia, I felt any connection to astrology just fall away. I was like, it's a distraction, it's an addiction.
It is a distraction.
And I'm questioning now, it's like, oh, it's this like clothes that I put on as part of my character, or?
Yeah, a lot of belief systems, including things like astrology, a lot of New Age belief systems, but also a lot of belief systems associated with religion and other things like that. Most of us don't realise that we have attractions to them for lots of reasons associated with our childhood belief systems that got established during our childhood. And so a lot of people don't realise that they feel attracted to certain things because of that. And
a lot of people who are interested in astrology, I'm sure you've encountered this, you know, they're quite proud of their Leo traits, or their, oh, that's because I'm a Capricorn. It gives a sort of a sense of specialness and identity, or an excuse
which are all injuries
for sin, you know, depending on how the person is attracted to it. Yeah.
So really a lot of these things are being created to describe injuries.
And like a justification.
And justify them, or to be proud of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
So you end up with sort of this idea that you have a certain personality type or certain leanings, you know, and things like that. Of course, it would be very unfair of God to create things, personality, which is different to what we call personality type. So a lot of people say personality type when really they mean injury type.
It's a common way people are like this.
Yeah.
And how that's expressed.
Yeah, you know, and then, but that's very different to what God views as personality, which is a very, very different thing. And like I said in last group, there's no words on earth to describe personalities actually. They are things that you can only feel. And you can't really describe them accurately. Most of the things you describe currently as personality are not personality at all. Injuries or what you believe are strengths or weaknesses.
Thank you. Quick question for Mary. I've just started reading through the Mists and have noticed that there's like a book group that you gave. Would you recommend I watch the video before reading each chapter, or how to approach using that material in the best way?
I'd read the chapter and then watch the corresponding video. Yeah.
Thank you.
We might correct some things in that series at some point, but it's got some good discussion of spiritual principles for sure.
Yeah. Bear in mind that all those books that are written by Robert James Lees were channel material from spirits that weren't on the Divine Love Path. So.
But a lot of what we discuss is good principles.
Yeah.
Relating to
spirit life, relating to
love,
truth, love,
spirit
life.
Yeah.
Although what I found most helpful was the one between you and Jesus.
Yeah.
Because the discussion is...
It's good. Good discussion. That's later on, after you stop having groups.
Yeah, and at some point in the future we'll probably channel that for hour again too, and just talk. And so you get a bit of background as to what his progression has been. So, and also get a feel from him about what it's like to make a transition from the natural love path to the divine love path as well.
Yeah.
Samir?
On the topic of personality and character, does our personality give us a propensity towards certain passions when it comes?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, there's certain things. You can develop passion in almost every area of life as a development. So desire is something that is developed. But there are certain things you're going to find that really match your personality strongly. And under those, connect you to your personality more. And so an example of that, let's say you've got a personality where you have a strong sort of engineering bent. And then, so every spirit in the celestial heavens is an engineer pretty much. And just like everyone's a musician. But there are certain ones who just have this real strong passion for it and are far more interested in it than others. And in fact, Cornelius actually leads the entire engineering team of the spirit world because of his passion in his soul for it. So Mary and I sort of have a more generalised passion in all areas, whereas certain ones of the 14 who came to help us have a more specific passion in certain areas, and they have more detailed knowledge sometimes, or more detailed experience maybe. We have a detailed knowledge only because of our closeness to God in comparison, but they have a more detailed experience because their passion leads them in that direction more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and when you engage in a passion that's really affiliated with your personality, brings you a lot of joy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Sort of what makes you light up, and it also brings a lot of purpose to your life too, actually. Yeah.
Hi, Kevin. What is your art like?
What is that?
Your art.
Well, depends whether you're talking about our spirit world art or our art on earth. There are certain things that are very hard to describe to you. Same goes with music. Music's very hard to describe to you on earth, like what it's like in the spirit world. Art gets created through the expression of your nature and your desire and your personality and you acting upon that. And as you go, you finish up creating things in the higher schools. You finish up creating things without actually personal effort being used in the creation of those things. And so, because the effort is coming from the soul, from the emotional state of the soul rather than from your intellect. And so, you're basically walking through life creating things. And many of you don't realise that even now that's what you're doing with your home in the spirit world. In your own home in the spirit world, all of you have a home of one kind or another in the spirit world. And in that home, you've already created the art that's sitting on the walls of that home. And the way you've done that is by living a life here that then created a record of that life there as art. So a lot of what you'll actually look at some of the art that's on the walls and realise that as a perfect record of a statement of your life on earth. Now, because many of you have also had sin while you're on earth, you'll see the record of that sin in that art as well. So that the art will contain the sin and the pure things you did, the loving things you did, and the things that you did that were unloving, and it will all be depicted as pictures in one way or another. Similar to the music you create, the music you create in the spirit world is very much a reflection of how much love you have in your soul. So while you have imperfections in your soul, you can't actually create music that is, you could say, in tune. So you'll find that the music when in your home that is played when you play it will be discordant sometimes. It will have its own imperfections, and that will also be a record of the sin you've imbibed on earth, and it will remind you of that sin. And so, of course, as you grow in higher spheres, the more sinless you become, the less that occurs. And what occurs more is that it's a record of all the loving deeds or the loving attitudes and passions and desires you have along with your personality. So by the time you hit the celestial heavens, the art and the music that you are involved with are largely to do with what your soul desired to do in harmony with love, and doesn't anymore contain a record of any sin that you imbibe. And so it's a completely different experience than on earth, you know, with regard to music or art. Most people on earth, when they engage music or art, frequently, of course, musicians and artists are spirit, if not overcloaked, then certainly severely influenced. Or when I say severely, what I mean is it's not necessarily good influence either. A lot of times it's quite dark spirit influences a lot of art and music on earth. And therefore it's not a true record of the person's soul condition, because it's an influence condition. But in the spirit world it's very different to that. But in terms of describing it, well, you're going to have to look at it to see it actually, really. It's one of those things you've got to experience. And until you experience it, you won't sort of understand the meaning of what I've even just said, probably. Yeah. Makes sense? No. Yeah, so it's very different than what we do here. Here we tend to have an intellectual concept. Even as an artist, you tend to have an intellectual concept or an emotional feeling combined with an intellectual concept, and then you want to put it on some way of expressing it physically. So you know, my favourite on earth has been things like black and whites with charcoal or pencil on paper. That's my sort of more favourite method of doing art on earth. But there's been reasons for that, reasons why I like that here, because the atmosphere here feels black and white. When I say grey, it's more what it feels. Whereas the colours there's a lot of colour missing here, like vibrancy missing here. So, you know, on earth, a lot of it is inspired, but not, you could say not positively inspired. A lot of it's quite dark. And if you look at a lot of art and music now, it's pretty dark, isn't it? Yeah. And so as you progress in love, you won't be drawn to the darkness of all that.
Get a chance to talk to Sarah and look at you.
I can't hear you, Fernando.
Did you get a chance to talk to Sarah and Luke last month when we were in Nova Scotia?
No.
No, we didn't. We talked to Luke's parents, and they came to our seminar. And I mean his parents in this life. They came to our seminar, and we helped his brother who just committed suicide as well while we were talking to them. And so they've had some upheaval in their family just a month or two before we arrived in Nova Scotia. But we didn't get to talk to Luke or Sarah, even though we were very close to where they were.
They don't want to talk to us, so we respect that.
Yeah.
Is it okay to ask a personal question?
For
It's just because before, my principle had been there's no use crying over a spilled milk.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering if that principle blocked a lot of my emotions.
I agree. Yes,
Absolutely.
It's a stoic view of pain. So it's sort of like rigidity towards pain. You've got to get used to being sensitive to the pain, which means that. So let's call this pain spilt milk, shall we? So you have to learn how to be sensitive to it and feel it, but also work through. You guys all right? You're off? You're off now?
We'll see you Friday.
We'll see you Friday.
I see you on Friday, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's okay.
I only work 2.5 miles from here.
No worries, no worries. Yeah. See you soon. Yeah, so the whole concept of sort of shutting yourself down from emotional experience is going to make it very, very difficult to stay open on all sorts of issues. What was it? When I had that interview series with Julie about soul preclusion and all those things.
Ooh, it's a long time ago.
Yeah. 2013 or...
There is a series called
I don't know.
It's How the Soul Works or How the Soul Operates. Has anyone seen it? Where we talked about preclusion. Yeah. Have you seen that one? Yeah.
I know that's sort of a highly technical discussion that we did there, but which most people find quite hard to connect to. But it's worth having a look at it from an emotional perspective and understand that your emotions, or that you deny, that you're shutting down, preclude other things from entering you emotionally. So now anything can only enter you intellectually. And the trouble, as we've already described, to many of you already, is the intellect is a very, very poor tool in understanding God's truth. And in fact, there are certain parts, any of God's truth above the sixth sphere, the intellect is not able to understand. And so the problem with that is that if you shut down soul faculties, and most people, by denying emotion or by saying don't cry about certain things, you're denying emotion, you're shutting down emotion. And emotion is a soul faculty. By shutting down a soul faculty, you disable the ability of the soul to understand other things. So this is a big problem that the majority of people on earth have, is that we try to shut down our pain, but we don't realise in the process of shutting down your pain, you're also at the same time shutting down your pleasure. Right? Because the faculty that experiences both pain and pleasure emotionally is the same faculty. So you can't shut down one half of the faculty and hope that the other half of the faculty still works. Right? So when it comes to your emotions, it's very important to understand that if you start shutting down your emotions and have a stoic view towards your emotions, a feeling that you want to control your emotions, then you're going to be controlling a faculty that exists in your soul that it also is used for lots of other purposes, including sensitivity, sensitivity to truth, sincerity, and a lot of other qualities will be impossible to develop while that faculty is shut down. So yes, it has a big effect on you when you have the attitude, don't cry over spilt milk. Yeah? And it might seem like a very innocent thing to say to yourself, but the key is to get to the stage where you don't cry over spilt milk, because you have let go all of your tears about the spilt milk. Not to stop crying and store them all. And the majority of people, what they do with their sadness is they store it all rather than letting it pass through them. And when you do that, you're shutting down some primary faculties of the soul, which enable the soul to understand other things. So if you do that also, you won't be able to continue receiving God's love, because it's actually against the design of your own soul that a person shuts down their emotional faculties. And if you shut down your own emotional faculties, which you can attempt to do, it's very difficult to do it continually, but you can attempt to do it. If you do shut down your own faculties, then you'll reap the consequences of those faculties not being useful anymore. And there are many consequences of that, including the inability to understand God's truth is one of the consequences. But there are many other consequences. You can't understand people anymore either. They do things that confuse you, and you have no way of resolving as to why they did it, because the emotional faculties are able to determine why people have done anything they do. So yeah, you end up shutting down so much of yourself.
Yeah, and often, you know, that saying comes from, there's no use crying over spilt milk, as in you can't get the milk back in the bottle. It's a way of distancing yourself from loss, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so another way of saying what Jesus said is, in a far more rudimentary way, but you know, if you don't grieve your losses, you can't experience new joys. You know, and you're also distancing yourself from what your life has been, if there has been losses in it. And this is how people end up with things like dementia and things, because they're trying to forget the losses in their life rather than grieve them.
You end up, when you store emotional pain, the emotional pain stored inside the soul builds up to such an extent that pathways inside the soul that enable you to feel and enable you to experience things all start breaking. They all don't work anymore. And so the net result is that you become more insensitive to yourself and others. You become more unable to understand the pain you're in and also understand the pain others are in. You also are not able to understand, like I said, truth, God's truth, because truth comes through emotional pathways in the soul. And if you don't have them open, then you won't receive truth. So a lot of people think they understand truth, but from our perspective, they don't understand any of it yet, because the emotional pathways are so broken down in their soul that there's no ability for that truth that they believe themselves to intellectually know, for it to enter their soul or change their life in any way. So it's very important to not shut down those pathways in the soul. Now, a person your age and my age has usually done that for their entire life, right from the time of little girl, little boy, have shut down all of these pathways for a long time. So the older you get, the more difficult it is to open them up again. And this is something, this is whether you are here on earth or in the spirit world. Many people in the spirit world are quite, they're embroiled in their emotions without understanding any of them, because all the pathways of their soul have been shut down. Their ability to understand their own self has now shut down, to the degree they don't even know their own motivations anymore. They don't even know why they did what they did. And you see that a lot on earth, don't you, at times where people say to you, I don't even know why I did that. You know, like, I did this thing and I don't even know why I did that either. You know, this is all very indicative of people who've become so shut down emotionally that the pathways in their soul of understanding even themselves have now been broken. And now when they look at their own behaviour, they don't even understand why they did what they did. Because your mind can't grasp what the soul can't understand in the end. Enrique?
I was watching a video recently, and you happened to circle, I had forgotten about this, but you circled the middle of Mexico, and you happen to be living there, and I was just wondering about learning centers, because you've only talked about certain places in the world.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if that's still a go, or?
Honestly, learning centres anywhere in the world are very dependent on people. In fact, the people are the learning centre, and the centre itself is just a place to do things, you know. It's the people that are the centre, and to a large degree where centres occur will be dependent upon the development of people in different locations. That being said, we do believe that, and I still believe that some places on earth are better than others for these centres. Yeah, and for lots of different reasons. Some of them are spiritually motivated reasons, some of them are physically motivated reasons.
Like geographical.
Geographical. And some of them are also sort of related to sort of looking after the people who eventually will be in those locations. So there's a lot, so survival, you could say, some related to that. And some are related to the fact that the potentials that I feel about there being events that occur on Earth that will be of a cataclysmic enough nature where you don't want to set up a centre only to have, you know, the centre in a quite sort of difficult place to have survival. Does that make sense to you? Yeah. So I do feel eventually there'll be one in Mexico, I think. But just like eventually there's going to be ones in Africa and other places. The problem at the moment, of course, is that we have not met many people from those locations. And it's interesting even just meeting our pastor here, because he does have links with Kenya and other places. And this is why we're often interested in catching up with people from all around the earth, you know, in different ways, because you never know what it's going to lead to in the future. But in terms of us looking at learning centres now, there are certain areas where we feel things will be quite safe and also quite good to set up a centre. But it's going to take many, many years, because the people yet do not understand the amount of development required to actually end up running a centre in the manner in which we feel it needs to run. Probably the only people at this stage who do understand that are the 3 directors of our learning centre in Australia, and even then their understanding is quite rudimentary compared to my own.
Because I had a desire, we went to Austin and that didn't work out for us at all.
Yeah.
Because of our own errors. Found ourselves in Mexico and I thought it was long gone, and then I saw that video.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if because I feel like I'm told to go places. I could be totally wrong about that, that I have attractions for a reason. Like a while ago, I wondered if you thought I would go there, because I asked the question and you didn't want me to limit it to the States, and I felt it and I let the fear rule and I said States, and you were like, anywhere.
Yeah.
I shut down. I knew you were giving me an opportunity. And then in that same talk, you said, hey, you might go to New Mexico and meet somebody and they tell you they're building, and that exact same thing did happen, but you were only 1 state off. It was in Texas. And then I said, he said this would happen. And years
well,
later,
I was only giving you, I wasn't stating what I felt would happen. I'm just trying to open your mind to the possibilities of what would happen. But one thing I must say to you is that you are very spirit influenced when it comes to your choices and decisions. And quite often that influence is not the good influence you think it is.
And Ricky, when you decide to develop your will in a loving manner, truly decide it, you'll get...
Which you haven't done yet.
Which you haven't done yet. When you decide no more addictions, I'm going to live a principled life and I'm going to feel whatever comes up in that process, the guidance you receive will be very good. But until that point, you can't say that it's necessarily good, because there's all these other attractions you have around your addictions and
lots of dark spirit influence around you surrounding your addictions.
Yeah.
And particularly your addictions for the specialness.
Yeah. That's the thing to work on.
But many people who are quite open mediumistically are guided by that one addiction, and unfortunately that addiction can lead you in Australia in so many areas of life, and also cause a lot of annoyance to the rest of your family and everything else, where you're not considering love of them, love of them and care for them,
and not showing up as a good husband and father because you've got your personal addictions,
Yeah.
When you decide to, again, have that principled life for love, they will find you far more consistent, far more
at the moment,
sensitive.
you're very attracted to the metaphysical, but you're not very attracted to principles.
Yeah.
And a person who's attracted to the metaphysical but not to the principles gets easily misled and often misleads others. And this is the danger you're in, both in terms of misleading yourself and also others. And even your own family, like at times, even though you think you're acting in a loving manner. And, what the people around you need to realise is that a person who's that attracted to those things but neglects responsibility and neglects love in all aspects of your life is not someone they should follow. So if you want to go to another location, and location here, location there, well, that's up to you. But at the end of the day, if I was part of your family, I'd be choosing not to follow you until you work out who's influencing you and what influences they have on you. You understand what I mean? Because at the moment you don't understand the influences upon you spiritually. I mean the spirits that are influencing you. And you think, oh, they're saying it's a good idea, and I feel it's a good idea. And then you go off and do something you feel is a good idea, but you haven't examined the principles involved, whether it's a good idea or not. And also even the principles involved of dragging your entire family around, following your life, rather than them being allowed to have their life. Even that principle is a very important principle. So, you know, and then there's also the principles involved in teaching others when you do not know the spirits who are actually talking through you. You have yet to identify them. You've yet to understand their motivations for connecting with you, and yet you're expecting other people to listen to you when you do channel and things like that. So that's a very dangerous thing to do, because basically what you're doing there is saying you should listen to me, but I don't know who I'm listening to. So
yeah. A lot of people do this when they hear divine truth, and I've seen you do this where you want to build a life and sort of either build a following or build your mediumship or do all these things without first building that character, building your relationship with God, which doesn't involve a physical location as much as a spiritual aspiration, and it's very important not to get seduced by the building of the physical things or the metaphysical things and think that that's you building the character and building your relationship with God. Yeah. If you do the building on yourself first, if you like, with God, then these other things will pan out. But at the moment, even what you just described, you're sort of letting spirits guide you to these different things. But because you haven't done the work on your character, then you're not discerning about who those people are.
So what you basically said in these talks, follow that. Begin with principles, and it takes care of everything else, including being misled.
Yeah, well, this is where you've got to be really sincere about your own addictions and your own sins. And a person whose principle would be really sincere about their own sins, they'd be very aware of what their own sins are, and they'd want to be aware of what their own sins are, and they would never act upon them. And particularly with the sin you have of wanting to be special, that's a fairly big sin, leading you in a lot of quite dark directions at times. And also having sort of, it affects the rest of your family quite a lot too. And that is having a negative effect on your life and their life. So that's an example. If you understood the principle of humility, so humility, there are many sub-aspects to the humility, and one is that none of us are special.
Yeah, I know I struggle with that.
Or you can say it another way, all of us are special.
I'm trying to do this my whole life, and thought and everything. It's not because I don't want to feel this is me.
That's right. And in a lot of ways you've not accepted what God's creation and part of you is, which is your personality. And in fact, what you're trying to do is circumnavigate your true personality by feeling that you're special and because you really have an addiction to mediumship rather than the addiction to mediumship is making you feel special. And that's not a proper use of even mediumship. The proper use of mediumship is primarily to share truths and also to be helpful with people on earth, not so you can feel anything from it.
Not so I'm like an emotional vampire, the things that I've noticed, if there's taking involved and it's impure.
That's right.
Or if you're trying to do that thing you're saying, that's taking as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm superior.
I'm special because I can, or because
You should listen to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody has to listen to you. Even your own wife doesn't have to listen to you. Does it make sense? Nobody has to listen to you. Your children don't have to listen to you either. It's important, of course, that they learn to listen It's important they learn to listen to somebody who loves them. But when you're just addicted to your own feelings, then that's proof that you don't love them. Does that make sense? So it'd be different, like Mary and I were discussing this morning. There is a principle that if a person is more loving than you, then it's very wise to trust them and listen to them. The problem that you face is you'd like to believe you're more loving than your family when you're not. And in fact, the addiction to being special makes, in a lot of ways, you darker than the rest of your family in terms of condition of love. And if they then listen to you in that state, then it's going to be to their own detriment. If you became more loving, then of course a person can trust what they hear from you more and listen to you more. And of course, you think about it from the perspective of God. God is the most trustworthy being in the universe. And then every one else of us is who are just humans. We're not gods. We're just humans. We have various degrees of love, and the persons who have more love than others, listen to them more. But and eventually you'll come oftentimes to trust them completely because you know that they have more love than you do. But when you're in an illusion that you love more than others do, and then spirits feed that illusion, anybody who listens to you now is in danger themselves. Because of whatever you're told, they will get told, and then they'll listen to it. And if you can't correctly identify who you listen to or the motive you have in listening to them, but which for you is a lot about feeling special, then unfortunately you're going to end up misleading a lot of people using these things. And like I said, in your own family. Now, it's funny because the rest of the family smile when I say these things, right?
And
so
squirm a little bit.
And squirm. And the reason why is because they are already aware of this to a degree, of what I'm saying to you. And they've believed that your own image of yourself means that they can't really say anything about it. And also, you've believed that you're doing things in harmony with the teachings that we're teaching, Mary and I are teaching. And you're trying to convince your family that you are doing such things, but we don't agree. You are not doing such things. Does that make sense? And now, you know, it's funny because during the week last week we had a discussion with Cheng and Kimberly and Sai and Risha about how the men in particular were believing themselves to be, you know, in a certain condition and feeling that they were in a better condition than their girls were and so forth. And when you start analysing the behaviour, you can see that's not actually true. Quite frequently, the other party who'd be involved in the relationship knows that you're not being loving or can feel that you're not, right? But because of your own level of arrogance in the situation, you can't even hear from them that you are, and they don't even feel brave enough to even say it to you. Because of the level of certainty, and if it's spirit-fueled certainty, it's like more than just your own certainty now. It's also other spirits who are controlling you going, oh, I'm certain too, you know, and so you feel doubly certain, even though it's an error, you know. So this is the danger of what you're doing. You are mediumistic, of course, just like everyone else here is. But when you have the addiction to get power over others or to be special or to be, you know, adored by others, then of course it's no longer being used for the right purpose.
I did think I noticed, but I wanted to ignore it, like sometimes, because you know how certain, either God or your guides feel a certain way, and you can feel that pulling away, or, hey, where are you going? And just accepting of, oh, you're here, okay, cool. And thinking, I tried to draw the line helpful, but I wasn't feeling why they were helpful. What were they getting out of it? Why would they allow me to feel somebody and give them information that they agreed was true? I should have been very discerning about who that was and what their motivations were.
Of the spirit, you mean?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, but you're not discerning about your own motivation, so how can you discern another's?
Okay, yeah, we wanna,
So you're still
This
focusing
goes back-
now, you're still focusing on their motivation, and I'm going, no, the problem here isn't their motivation, because if you sort out your motivation, you'll attract spirits with a better motivation, right? So the problem isn't their motivation, it's yours.
So as soon as you feel that, you know, what you felt were higher spirits pulling away and other people there, the first thing I would ask myself is what's going on in me? Yeah.
yeah, and I think I noticed that was a truthful whatever, but that would have been where, why? Because I think I know it's a good reason that they would pull away.
Of course.
Yeah, that's right. But because you're resisting dealing with the internal, you know, the soul, your soul condition.
And you don't want to deal with it emotionally. You want to believe you're intellectually over things when emotionally you haven't dealt with things.
I mean, you said exactly your issue before. You think that doing that would mean that you're lesser than others.
Yeah, and I'm finding that's very painful because, like, it doesn't just feel like shame or grief. It feels like there's something like annihilation or excommunication.
But that's just your feeling.
That's a false belief, though.
Yeah. It's
See, can I just say something to all of you? Just a principle that I'd like to remind all of you. I was talking about this with Robert just at lunchtime. God's principles, when you engage them, will lead you in a direction. And they'll lead you in a direction that's always loving, always truthful, always honest with self, always honest with others. You'll be humble, you'll have faith. God's principles lead you in these directions. So every loving principle has sub-aspects to it. So an example is love of self requires responsibility for self, for example. Responsibility for your own emotions, that's just an example. But when you live in harmony with the principle, you start to realise that what you feel is immaterial. It's not important. What the principle you live by will trigger your feelings, and you need to feel them. But see, what you frequently do, and then this is something I noticed a lot last weekend, is everybody was saying to me, but the reason why I do it's important. And
well, this is what I feel about it.
Well, this is what I feel about it, and to be frank, I don't care what you feel about it. Do you know what I mean? And the reason why I don't care about what you feel about it, because I don't care what I feel about it either. All I care about is, what is the principle and am I doing it? Am I living it? If I'm not living it, then live it. If I'm going to live it, if I'm humble, whatever feelings I have, and no matter how hard they are, I'll deal with them. If I'm humble. If I've learned the principle of humility and all of the sub-aspects involved in humility, when I live in harmony with principles of truth and love in every circumstance, my humility as a principle will always be there. And if I need to feel and I need to have my cries and I need to release things, I'll do it automatically. But my feelings are not really important. What's important is what are the principles? Are they right? Are they righteous? Are they in alignment with God's principles? If I live in harmony with God's principles, whatever I feel, I'm just going to feel.
And I won't actually, you sort of try, and a lot of people do this on the weekend as well, you try and describe the feeling that you think you're going to have or you need to have, but you won't even know what the feeling is until you make that choice to live by the principle.
Yeah.
And the principle of humility as you live by other principles.
And when you live by the principle and give up your addictions, then you'll start to, and go through the humble process of dealing with your feelings. Then you'll start to understand yourself and why you even chose to do something. That makes sense to you? Yeah.
I think I get it. I get what you're saying a lot.
Yeah.
And it's hitting me hard right now.
Yeah. But often I find you agree with me more than Enrique does.
Yes.
But
He thinks he's the... Yes, okay. He thinks because he's been doing following a lot longer that he's here, not here.
That's right.
And I feel that he treats me like that a lot of times.
He does, yes.
It does. It makes me feel like shit, so I don't say nothing to him. I'm like, But a lot of times you say something and he hears you, and I said the same exact fucking shit.
Like 5 years ago.
And I'm like, okay, I know I'm a female, I'm a woman, mother,
it's very
whatever. But it's so because I don't feel like I'm right all the time, but I feel like I'm going towards the right direction. And I don't say nothing because he uses it kind of against me. Like you're not really
He
following
does,
it.
yes. And many men we know do this.
And it is very damaging for their future that they do this to
Yeah.
their spouses. It's usually men with their wives, sometimes it's women with their husbands, but it is very damaging to use God's truth to actually be in a power trip with your
It
spouse.
kind of turns me off from it. It kind of,
Yes.
so
Yes.
that's why I always tell him, I'm doing my own thing, leave me alone.
Yes. Yeah.
I follow, he's like, are you praying? Don't worry about it. I'm doing my thing. I feel like I'm good. Worry about yourself. But it makes
Can I
me so...
just stop you for a minute? Yeah, you're mad, but just before you were really close to where you need to go, which is sad.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'm sad.
now you're getting
Now you're getting
mad
mad.
over the sad, so you feel
Because I don't
Yeah.
want to.
You don't want to feel
You're
how
allowed to
harsh that is. You know, like, you know, what we see a lot of people doing, particularly who are in their intellect, thinking they understand divine truth and they don't. And is they start, you know, putting pressures and everything on everybody else around them quite a lot. And for the most part, that's why most people around them don't listen to them, because they're actually not practicing the principles that we're teaching. They're actually practicing arrogance. And when you practice arrogance with other people, naturally there's going to be difficult, you know, for the other people. The key for you is to feel your grief. But the second thing I'd like to address, and that is, you're not prepared to have a decent, like, argument with him about it. Like, you're not prepared to go, Enrique, you're just so wrong on this matter. You know, like, you've got no idea what you're talking about, mate. Like, you're not prepared to have that sort of straightforward conversation, you know, because you feel it's too much effort, there's one. But secondly, and more importantly, you feel very unloved here. And if you have to have a conversation with him about it, you'll feel more unloved. Does that make sense? And this is why you don't want to have the conversation, because you'll just feel more unloved in the conversation. He'll demonstrate through the arrogance that he doesn't love you, and you become more conscious of it, and then that'll make you feel more unloved. And that's what you're trying to avoid. You're trying to avoid the feeling that you're not being loved. Now, eventually, if you can get over that feeling,
Go through the feeling.
Go through the feeling, and that's how you get over it. What will happen is you'll be able to raise every single issue with everyone around you whenever you need to, without being angry anymore, because you've dealt with your grief, without being angry anymore. And then the beauty of doing that is that now, every single time he knows you disagree. See, at the moment, he feels when you're silent, that means that maybe you agree. Right?
It's just not worth it to me.
I understand that, but the reason why it's not worth it to you is because there's this grief about being loved enough for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, you can feel that, right?
Yeah.
So this is a problem with a person who gets really arrogant about divine truth, is that the people around them start feeling a lot of grief about being unloved by the person, right? But they're unwilling to have the argument that says, you are not being loving. You know, you say you're being taught to love, but you're becoming less loving. Do you see? And this is something that most people who are in their intellect, when they try to understand what Mary and I teach, will do. They will use what they now feel they know to meet their own addictions with other people. And that's a very, very dark use of God's truth. Right? And we see it happening all the time. But it's very wrong. And this is why frequently when we're with you, you feel, and it's the same if you think for yourself, Kimberly, when we had the discussion a week ago for Anusha, it was the same, that you can feel more that we understand the position you're in, right?
John, with your wife, Laurie, as
Yeah,
well.
Laurie's the same for John. There's this, many times we understand the position you are in better than your own partner understands the position they're putting you in. And you know, that's very sad. But also what's very sad is that you've tried to say this to him for the last many years. Like, how many years have we known you? It was like solid 10, isn't it? 10, yeah. And you've been trying to say that for probably 9 of them. You know, these kind of things. And he's not listening to you. And then he listens to me, but is he even listening to me either?
I think he hears the words
He
and
hears the
repeats
words.
them.
But he's not
That's
actually.
because the thing I said to you before, Ricky, you're not building this thing inside of yourself about principle, about
It's not just because
soul
of that. though.
condition. You don't want it to enter you.
Yeah, but it's not just because of that. It's primarily because of his arrogance. Right? Primarily because of the arrogance, though. The desire for arrogance, which is the desire to have power over your own emotions, is the desire for arrogance. You want to be arrogant. And so with me, you're arrogant too. You believe that you get or understand what I'm teaching when I've said to you quite clearly that you do not. Right? And I find for many of the men it's like this. I can say to them quite clearly, the teacher, the person who's teaching you these things can say to you quite clearly, you do not understand it and you disagree. Even with the person who's teaching you. Right? Now that is an issue, it's going to be a very difficult issue to overcome. Because if the person teaching you is saying to you, you do not understand and you think you do, well, what's going to change you now? What's going to adjust you now? Now, the only thing that can adjust you is you're getting hammered by the law of compensation, attraction, and cause and effect. That's the only thing that can change you now. You're not going to get any help in that place by anybody who's loving. And this is why the spirits who are loving step away, because they know it's impossible to help you in that place. Makes sense? So there's something to be very aware of, and it's important. And it's good you give us an opportunity to say this to your family as well. Very important for them to be aware of. Because it's important for them to go, Dad, here you are, or husband, here you are, going down this same track again, you know, thinking you know when you don't know, and look at how unloving it is to us, and you're not even considering that, you know, that kind of thing. And it's a very damaging place, and you're thinking you're practicing God's truth, and look at the terrible, you know, your family's just not properly coming along for the ride. But to be frank, if your family went along for the ride you're on, they're going to end up in the same hellish place you're in, and you don't believe you are. Right? And that's the issue you face. Every person who's arrogant and wants to be special and wants to think they understand and they do not is just going to mislead others into the same place or darker. Or the people around them eventually will just go, I don't want to be with you anymore because you're too hard to live with. You know. Many of you believe that because I'm so direct with my statements of truth that I am an arrogant person, and nothing could be further from the truth. Yeah. Mary lives with me, she knows what I'm like. Many of you don't live with me, all of you don't live with me. You don't really know me as much as you think you do. And you don't understand how I feel that every opinion I have is open to change.
But you love truth, and this is what I would encourage for you, Anna, in your marriage, is to love truth above what you might feel. Because if you love truth and you stand up for truth and you speak truthfully with Enrique, it will uncover grief for you. You'll have the grief, and then
you'll get upset and whatever else.
Whatever, you'll each work through your things.
But his emotions don't matter. What matters is the truth.
Yeah, because it's the truth that binds you in a relationship, truth and love. And if those things aren't there in the first place, it's a very tenuous connection anyway. And you're settling for something that could be so much better, but you're just trying to guard grief rather than going for that better thing.
Yeah. But Enrique, you've got to see you putting your family in that position, which is not a good position to put people in. To put them in a position where they've got to fight with you for their own existence part, almost, in the family. That's not a good position to put your family in. And it's not a good position to put your wife in a position where she feels that she can hardly even speak with you about what's happening. You, a humble person, like if I'm humble, I will know Mary's every feeling about how annoyed she is with me. You understand?
It happens. I'm quietly in the corner and Jesus like, you're pretty annoying right now, aren't you?
And I'll also know why she's annoyed. Eventually, if I'm humble enough, I will know why. But I'll also not tell her why. I'll ask her why.
Yeah.
Because it gives her an opportunity to express why, right? So this means that she's able to then express herself. So Mary can express herself honestly. I need to.
But you can even feel when I'm not expressing myself honestly. See, you're obviously not feeling this. Like
you can't feel your wife, because if you would know she's bottling up all of these emotions and feeling unloved by you, uncared for,
and not listened to.
And not listened to.
Disagreeing with decisions.
Yeah.
If you either feel it and don't care, or you just don't feel it.
And probably you don't feel it,
I'd say
right? Because you're so embroiled in this addiction to be special with spirits, you're not going to feel much else, to be honest, in that place. So, you know, but the net result of that is that the people around you feel you don't understand them, you don't get them, you don't understand why they feel the way they feel. But I meet your family, your children, and for the very first time, and I understand more about what they feel and why they feel it with you than you do. And you live with them all the time. Like, it doesn't make any sense if you think about it, but it's because you're not open emotionally to understanding what they feel. You're so embroiled in your own feelings about meeting your own feelings. And the spirits around you know this about you. And so they know they can manipulate you in this way and suggest that thing to you and make you feel a bit more powerful here and make you feel powerful over your wife there and over your children here and everything. And you're driving the people around you nuts, but they don't care. The spirits don't care, and you don't care either because you're getting the addiction now. And so you don't care either. And that's not how I have a relationship. You know, it's very important in a relationship that I create, and Mary also creates, an atmosphere where we both understand each other. We both can express exactly how we feel with each other all the time.
Sometimes I think we need to have a weekend seminar on how to have an argument, because you know, people are either blindly abusive to their spouse, like out overtly, or just sort of withholding things all the time. And you know, you need to be able to have a robust discussion about things if you're actually going to find truth. You know, if you're both seeking truth,
yeah.
You're both going to have a robust discussion. You've got to be able to disagree and go away and feel your feelings and come back and keep working towards things.
Yeah.
But most couples don't have any tolerance for just even a disagreement, because as you said, Anna, you don't want to feel sad, you don't want to deal with
how unloved you feel.
The truth of what's happening. A lot of people are afraid their relationship might end, or that if something comes up for one person, they'll never get through it. Or these are all just false beliefs that ruin marriages.
Yeah. No, I you want to
I was just wondering, so when you see us with your spirit body, can you see how much we're holding in emotionally, or is...
It's more important that I feel you rather than see you. So yes, when you look at this person's spirit body and their physical one, by the way, you can usually see their injuries, but that's not the important thing. The important thing is feeling you. Like, and when you feel people, it's a much more nuanced experience. So you might look at a person's body or their physical body and go, oh yeah, I can see you got that thing there, which some people can do quite clearly. You know, they can say, oh, I can see you got a worth issue because of that sort of hole that sort of exists in your bowel there that I can see. But at the end of the day, it's all still very impersonal and metaphysical. It's not the feeling part of it is, wow, you felt this with your mother and felt this with your dad, and this is how you know, the nuances of all of that is the important thing to feel. And this is where love is involved. You see, you can look at a physical thing and go, for a person's body, and go, oh, they got this problem, obviously. Or you can look at their spirit body and go, oh, they got this problem, obviously. But that's really just, you could say, a physical examination that's very impersonal and not very caring.
So you could say love causes you to want to feel that love leads you to the causes. A medical doctor can look at a body and see the effects, or a spirit even in a low condition can look at a spirit body and see the effects.
Yeah.
But it's love, when there's love present, it's seeking the cause all the time, because it knows, the principle is that you deal with the cause, you get rid of the effects, and you get rid of any future effects. So anyone who loves is always compassionate to and seeking of causes.
And also seeing the relationship between a person's beliefs and the cause. So the cause is the belief. So there are many beliefs that happen, you know, that develop over a person's life that then cause their body to be harmed in different ways. And if you're just to praise the body, it's very critical. You need to get to the stage where you're looking at the real cause, which is very much about helping the person with their belief systems as to why they feel and believe the way they believe that causes these particular problems. So in the case of your dad, for example, that's why I focused you, Enrique, on the problem of wanting to feel special, right? Because that is causing a lot of trouble for you. You know, so it's causing body problems for you, but it's also causing you to engage with these spirits that are misleading you frequently, and therefore, you know, and putting a lot of pressure on you to be more unloving, actually. And if you understood how badly this one injury is affecting life, perhaps you might want to change it, you know. But at this stage, up until now, you haven't even understood that one injury, you're so desirous of meeting the addiction, and seeing that the addiction getting met is a good thing, rather than feeling that it's a very bad thing and it's causing a lot of damage to you and your life, and to the people around you as well. And therefore, it's going to have some long-term consequences. So the better thing, Ray, is to feel the person and go, how can I help? Like, when I feel your dad, sure, he's got body issues and you see certain problems and so forth, and there are many other problems that I've described, but the biggest one causing the majority of problems for him right now is the desire to be special.
Which I feel like I have as well. So.
Yes, well, you know, you're probably the favoured, you know, which one of Dad has also encouraged in the, because Anna is feeling more and more criticised by Dad, and Dad's going to focus on other women close to him to get certain addictions met, and you, being the older daughter, frequently are going to be end up in that role, and therefore there will be some level of feeling of sort of pride that you're in the role that comes with that, but there's also a lot of sad things that come with that as well. Yeah. Oh, that's nice, isn't it? What's that? Is that a fridge, is it? Or? The water.
Oh, yes. There we go. Very good. It's like a pump, is it?
No, it's very noisy spaces. Okay, so we go to Felicity next.
During this trip, I think you mentioned the word stupid.
Yeah.
And I have history with that word. So can you define God's definition of stupid and an example of a stupid person and how we can get out of it?
Out of stupidity, yeah. Often I'm doing so as a joke, I must say, Felicity. So, you know, that's something to just bear in mind.
Oh, but we've had this discussion, you and I, where the definition of stupid, rather than it being like a judgment of worth, but just acting stupidly, what does that mean?
What does that mean? Yeah, what do you think it means?
Illogical.
Illogical, but what's the definition of logic? Like, so an example of this is like, if you're doing something that is to your own detriment, is that clever or stupid?
Well, I was taught stupid by my mom.
Yeah. And that's where it's hard.
That's where it's hard. Yeah. So it's good you can laugh about just what I said, because it just helps you feel that it's not a judgment like your mum did with you. Like your mum was trying to put you down. It's not about that. What it's about is going, okay, what's the clever versus the very silly thing to do, right? So if we look at, for example, feeling your emotions, let's look at whether that's clever or stupid.
Now I know it's clever.
It's clever.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because you come to understand yourself better,
Yeah.
don't you?
Yeah.
And you come to understand life better, and you also come to understand other people better. And so therefore it's a very clever thing to do, even though a doctor may tell you it's stupid, right? Or unwise. But it's actually a very wise thing to do. Well, frequently what I see people doing is things that are in complete disharmony of their, of what's in their best interest. Does that make sense? So an example of that is, let's say you live with a man who's abusive, but you don't leave him.
Well, that's my mom. That's what she did.
That's right, so she's stupid. Can you see that?
It was projected.
Sorry, so it's
yeah.
really interesting, isn't it? She's saying to you, you're stupid, but actually she's there doing something completely illogical and silly, and that is staying with a person who doesn't love her and care about her and who demonstrates that every day. Obviously, the best thing she could have done would be to leave instead.
Yeah.
Right? So, and you even know that, right? You know,
I didn't know she hid it. She hid it. I didn't know until I bought it that she was abused.
Yeah.
But you can see that the action was, it was unwise to stay with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she was being silly.
Yeah.
She was being silly to her own detriment. Like she was living with a person who continually abused her, and in doing so, she allowed herself to be abused. So that she's taking an action which is to her own detriment, and that's a very silly thing to do. Very silly for any of us to do that. So it's very important that we recognise in the things we do. It's very important that we recognise when we're doing something very silly.
Well, you're allowed to say stupid.
To our own detriment. Well, I'm using silly instead of stupid because I know that your mum called you stupid, and I'm sensitive to that, you know, in the sense of you're not stupid, by the way. But your mum, interestingly enough, was.
Well, she acted, it's different, isn't it? When we use that word stupid. See, a lot of times the word stupid is used to describe someone who can't learn, or who is, it's a static state, like something that's permanent about you, is often the way the word stupid is used on earth. When Jesus uses it, he's more saying, there are some actions that are clever, and there are some actions that are stupid, and there's, and which is it that we're
change it.
doing?
You can change it. You're not permanently stupid. Nobody is.
Like your mum, I doubt she was unable to learn except for where she wanted to hold on to emotions. She chose not to learn certain things, and therefore she took silly or stupid actions by staying.
But also in the environment your mum was in with her husband.
Which she, yeah.
With your dad. It's impossible to make any clever decision after that one decision. So in other words, not only does that one decision cause her to live in a situation which is very, very dangerous to herself and to her children, but also that one decision then causes many other problems for her, in that she can no longer think clearly. She's no longer logical. She's no longer logical about other things in her life, because the one dominating thing that's dominating her entire life, she's not acting in a clever manner about. She's not free then to act in a clever manner about anything else either, unfortunately. So the problem is oftentimes we act in a manner that's very detrimental to self or to others. So an example of that. Enrique, as a previous example we were giving, is constantly treating Anna like she's less than him. Through his ability, through his feeling that he's special, he knows the truth, and Anna doesn't. Right? So he's constantly believing that. Now that's a very silly thing to do for Enrique, because if he wants a relationship with Anna in the future, she's just going to get more and more and more repelled by his behaviour. Does that make sense? The more arrogantly he acts, the more repelled his wife will become. So he's being stupid. Does that make sense? And the stupidity is being driven by an addiction. right? And this is frequently what happens to us, is we often become very silly when we're acting in our addictions. We think they're logical, we think they're supported, but they're not. And we think, you know, and I look at a lot of relationships, and I look at the men, particularly in many relationships we see, and I go, can't you see, like these men are so full of their own intellectual prowess, but they're just being so silly because they're not seeing the effect on their wife, and therefore the effect on the relationship, sexually, emotionally and spiritually. The relationship is getting destroyed by their action, and yet they're not seeing it. And yet they still want to stay arrogant, and yet they're not seeing the full effect of that arrogance on their own family life even. So that's very silly. That's stupid. The clever thing to do would be to at least work in your own interest. That would be, you know, that's more clever than working against your own interest. If your interest is to have the relationship, then it's in your interest to be sensitive to what the other person in the relationship feels. That's in your interest, to be sensitive to that. And the more you detune from that, the more insensitive I become, then naturally that's not in my own interest. Right? So what's in my interest is to stay sensitive to how Mary feels, stay sensitive to her emotions, stay sensitive to, you know, whatever she desires in her life, and stay sensitive to all of that. Because if I stay sensitive to all of that, not only is it in her interest, but it's also in mine. And frequently I see people working against their own interests. And that's a very stupid thing to do, to work against your own interest. Another example is, every time you don't speak the truth, you're working against your own interest. So an example of that is, many of you we've noticed here in America, you have this habit of like putting on a pretty facade about how you feel when you're talking to someone. It's sort of like, well, you guys could probably describe it better than I can. But what we observe is this, oh yes, no worries, yes, that's very interesting, yes, that's all right. And inside the feeling is almost completely opposite. I'm totally bored with this conversation, can this person please leave me? I really want to get away from this conversation. Inside that's what's going on, while on the outside, so, no worries, it's so interesting. It's like, do you understand what I'm saying? You're all very good at it. The majority of you are very good at this, right? So on the outward appearance, it's all very interesting. Inward thing is, oh boy, this is boring, and how long is this going to go on for, right? So outward and inside life is completely different. Now, if you allowed the inside feelings to be expressed, can you see the person barraging you with all of this stuff you're not interested in might have to pause for a moment and go, I thought you were interested. You know, a lot of times I'm talking to you more and more and more because you're acting like you're interested. So acting interested when you're not interested is stupid. Because the more you act like you're interested, the longer they're going to talk to you. And if you're not interested, you're actually encouraging them to talk to you longer and put up with the barrage coming from them longer than you would have otherwise. So you're not working in your own interest. And this is a fundamental thing we need to bear in mind is every time we act out of harmony with one of God's principles, we're not acting even in our own interest. Not even acting in our own interest, let alone somebody else's. Right? And so I find this quite fascinating when we travel, we see it a lot, where people are not acting in their own interest, and yet they keep doing the very thing that's against their own interest because of an addiction. They keep doing the very thing that encourages more of what's not in their interest. Right? And it's such a destructive thing to do. So in answer to your question, I feel that we do need to see that whenever we do things out of harmony with God's principles, we're being quite silly. Because God designed those principles for our happiness' sake. And whenever we act out of harmony with those principles, we are actually choosing a course of action that's going to cause us to be more unhappy. And that's a very silly thing to do, for our own sake. And so that was the context, remember, in Ireland, when I mentioned those things. I was saying that, quite often we do something And it's so totally stupid to do, and yet we just go ahead and do it, causing more problem for ourselves in the process. But nobody has ever been created stupid. There's nobody who's fundamentally stupid. This kind of stupidity comes from disobeying the principles, from sinning, fundamentally. Every time we sin or disobey the principles, we become sillier. You know, we become more and more stupid. We become so stupidity happens because we choose to disobey the principles, engage our own addictions, and so you could say our intelligence and our logic and our emotional logic all disappears when we do this. And then we can of course reverse that, and all we need to do is live more in harmony with principles, and then the logic will reappear. You know, the decision-making process will improve, the logic will reappear, we'll start
working towards our own happiness, to our own interests.
and also to the interests of others, but also we'll see that my interests are not opposing Mary's. So in other words, when I encourage Mary to be herself, Mary's going to feel happier with me as a result. Now that's not the reason why I do it, but it is a natural result of me encouraging Mary to want to be herself. She's going to think I'm nicer when I do it. That's a natural result. Yeah? And so I'm working not only in her interest, but also in mine. And if you look at society generally, and particularly Western societies, most people in Western societies are only acting in their own interest. They do not consider the interests of others, and yet, because they're only acting in their own interest, they don't realise that actually that's not in their own interest. Right? And you see it everywhere. You see it, you know, the way we use the environment, the way that we care for animals, the way we care for people. And we're often not acting in our own interest. And unfortunately, it's to our detriment. And we don't see it. We're just silly because we don't see that every time we act out of harmony with love of another, we are also acting out of harmony with love of ourselves. Yeah. The more people I treat badly, the less people are going to love me. That's logical, right? The more people I treat badly, the less will love me. And so if I would like to be loved at some point in the future, and I'm not saying it should be a need or anything, I'm just saying it's lovely to have people love you. The more you treat people in harmony with principles, the more they love you. The more you treat people in harmony with your addictions, the more they're going to get annoyed with you. Yeah. Just a fundamental truth.
Some principles they're not going to like.
I disagree. Everybody at some level appreciates the principles, even though they may not agree with them. So an example of that side is there are people who donate to Mary and I who don't like me at all. Like they don't like me at all. They don't like me on any level. They don't like my personality, my nature, what I say to them, nothing, but they still donate to us. Why? Because they have respect for the fact that I'll treat them the same manner and I'll do it consistently with principles.
And that's what I was going to say. It's not like you could also say the more consistent you are and acting on principle, the more people respect you, and the less consistent you are and the more you're in addictions, the less people respect you.
Yeah.
So we see that all the time.
Yeah, all the time. They might not agree with you.
Yeah.
There's plenty who don't agree.
There's a lot of anger.
Well, they may be very angry, yes, and upset and all sorts of things, yes, but at the end of the day, there's still enough respect to realise that, there's some consistency there, there's some principles there. You know, an example of that is people donate to us because they know I'm not going to use the funds selfishly. We don't go out and buy the next brand new car and buy the next brand new house and do the next brand new thing and We don't go on trips because we like travelling, you know, and seeing all the countryside. We go on trips because we want to meet people and teach them. And so people donate to us generally, because they can see that we're consistently faithful in the manner in which we use the funds we receive. Does that make sense? So they have some respect for that. Now imagine if every bit of funds you donated, we went and used it on the next latest thing. You know, we bought a $1 million house on a $1 million property, and we bought a $1 million car, you know, or $500,000 car. Obviously driving around here in San Diego a fair bit, right? And imagine if we did that. How would you feel about donating to us then? Could you see you'd feel a lot, like you'd see there's problems with that, wouldn't you? Like the way, whether we're using the funds wisely or we're using them selfishly. Now, of course, we need a place to live and whatever, but we don't need a fancy place to live. We don't need a fancy car. We just need a car, one that gets us around. And, you know, it's reliable. We need some things to help share divine truth, but we don't need any other funds should go towards things that are more important, like creating a centre of some kind and having a group of people that can teach truth in the world and things like that. So the average person who hears me speak and observes my behaviour over years and years can see that I'm not going to misuse the funds donated. And this is where, but if I did, can you see I'd be working to my own detriment, and to yours, of course, but also to our own detriment, in the sense that we'd be spending it all on ourselves, but eventually that can only dry up, because sooner or later the law is saying they're being selfish, they're being selfish, they're being selfish. And the more the law is saying they're being selfish, the more you're going to feel we're being selfish. And the more that happens, eventually you go, well, why would I donate to something that's just so selfish? Isn't a lot of these big mega churches you have in the USA like that, you know, where they get so much money, you know? I think, what was it, the Mormon Tabernacle we drove past on the way to your place the other day on the...
Latter-day Saints.
Sorry?
The Latter-day Saints Church.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is huge, isn't it? And it's fancy huge. It's not just huge, it's like marble this and whatever that, you know, it's like full on, you know. Huge amounts of money being used, obviously 1/10 of all of the income of every Mormon, every Latter-day Saint person is being used to develop that. It's like you look at the Catholic Church and you look at that, the Vatican, the country in its own right, actually now recognised as a country in its own right, and how much money is there in gold and silver, and then you look at where it's come from, and you look at the countries where there's all these very, very poor Catholics who've hardly got anything at all. And how do you feel about that? It's obviously not right. You know, sooner or later, these kind of things have to fail because they're obviously out of harmony with loving principles, right? And you look at a lot of religious faiths around the world, they build these fancy buildings, supposedly for God. But actually, God already owns the entire earth. So why would we have to build a premises for him to say this is where God is, when God's already built the entire earth? It's all his anyway. And it's a lie humans tell themselves that they do something holy, and aren't they good for doing something holy? It's all a lie, it's all an image. And all of these things are out of harmony with love, and sooner or later people see that. Now, it might sometimes be later rather than sooner, unfortunately. But that's partially because a lot of us are very much in denial of facing the truth, not even about our lives frequently, or the truth about what's going on around us. So one of the things that Mary and I see a lot is that a lot of societies are living in complete denial of the unreality of the existence they're living in. So this is very much the case in all Western societies. And probably one of the most unreal places on earth is the USA, to be frank. It's just so unreal here. It's like there's so many amazingly unreal things going on all the time. And the average person who's more sensitive would see it and then want to change that. But there's just so much going on here that is like a figment of everybody's imagination that that's good in any way.
How do you not support that? Like we were talking on the dinner table, there's airplanes that obviously are harmful for the environment.
Yep.
Then we still
Well, less harmful than a car.
Yeah, we don't have another option. So in a way we are supporting that to get around, right?
Yes, look, so the question becomes, the real question is, well, what if there's a difference between two unloving choices? Like, is really what you're saying. Well, see, I sort of feel like this. What is my motive for doing the thing? So an example of that is, if my motive for using my vehicle is selfish, aside from survival, I mean, aside from getting some food or some clothing or some shelter, if my motive for using my vehicle is selfish, in other words, I just want to go to the beach for a day or whatever, and it's not to do, it's just because I feel bored and I want to go, an example of that. So the motive is completely selfish. It's to avoid some feelings, actually. So my motive is selfish. Then, from God's perspective, it would be unwise for me to make that decision. Because my motive is purely selfish, and I'm going to do some things to damage the environment for a purely selfish motive. But if my motive is to share, if I've got to drive 20 kilometres to share divine truth with somebody, now my motive is not selfish anymore, it's for them. Now I would really consider doing that, because my motive is no longer selfish. It's no longer just for me. So the same applies with Mary and I. We had to think along about coming on this trip, to be honest, because we're aware when we come on these trips, compared to the carbon footprint we have at home, which is almost nothing. We've planted so many trees and we've done so much improvement to the environment and everything where we are, that, and also we look after our own waste almost completely. We only do one trip a week in our vehicle to get food. And so our carbon footprint is very, very low. And when I say low, it's carbon positive, not, low, not negative, in the sense that it's improving the world rather than the other way around. So when we come on a trip, we look at it, wow, we're going to be in a plane here, we're going to go there, and and everywhere we go, a lot of times we can't use the resources we'd like to use in order to make it carbon neutral. And it's just very difficult, in the place where we're staying, they use plastic a lot, like in most motels they do and things like that. So it's all, so we've got to, when we sit down and consider all that, we go, well, if we were doing that just for our own holiday's sake, to be honest, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. I'd have to come up with something that's better, that is better for the environment. But when it comes to sharing God's truth on earth, which is the highest possible ideal a person can have, now I must consider it. I must consider what I can do to do that, right? And so before we come, we do a lot of things to try to mitigate our trip, in the sense of, like, we make sure that our plants at home are doing well. When I say plants, we've 40 acres of now it's close to a forest, I suppose you could call it. And whether that's going to offset our with regard to offset our carbon while we're away, and what we can do at home to improve things. So an example of that is that for many, many years, we took all the waste about our vegetable waste of our entire town in Kingaroy. From
not the town, the shops, the fruit and veggie
stores in Kingaroy, and brought them to our home. And we used our home as the rubbish dump, I suppose you can call it, to deal with all that. Now, that benefited our home quite significantly because it was all vegetable waste. And we created these great mounds of vegetable waste that we decomposed, and we put mulch over them and all sorts of things. And as a result, we had huge growth on them, and huge benefit to our land doing it. But But the net benefit was we took all this waste and we did it for years, like when I say years, 7 years. And we've only stopped doing it on the trip, like, you know, or before this trip. And when we couldn't do it anymore because we didn't have the resources to do it anymore. That's the only time we stopped. And because they weren't assisting us, they were starting to put plastic in it all. And we were saying, look, unless you're going to take the plastic out, we can't take the waste anymore. Because we were having to take the plastic out. It was taking us days and days of effort to get all the plastic out of the waste. And they could have easily removed it at their end. So we said to them, look, the only reason why it stopped was because we said to them, look, we want you to take the plastic out of the waste, and they refused. So then we stopped. But aside from that, we did that for many, many years. And so all of these things have offset the work, the travel we're now doing. Does that make sense? In terms of the damage to the environment. So it's more a question about what's loving when you've got the choice of two unloving things, you know, to do. So we've done everything we can to offset the damage that we're doing by coming on this trip.
Next year we'll do better too. Because
Next year we're
you know,
better,
there's things we can improve, not just at home, but while we're traveling.
While we're traveling, yeah. So next year we want to stay only in places where we can bury our waste, for example. So we're looking for places where we can bury our waste rather than put our waste in rubbish bins or whatever. And make sure that waste decomposes rather than composts, because composting is a very unloving thing to do to the environment, really. Whereas decomposition is a much more loving thing to do to the environment. So we want to, you know, make sure that next time we can do that. So there's things, you sort of learn things too. See, one of the things about Earth is that God's giving you opportunities to learn how to correct your behaviour. So there's a whole heap of unloving things, isn't there, going on Earth at the moment. And our willingness to correct them is going to determine how much they change. So you can notice your own behaviour and then you can make decisions to correct. And this is what I'd encourage all of you to do with everything you do. Like, notice your own behaviour, notice how you treat this badly or that badly, or treat the environment badly, or, you know, treat your own needs above the environment or whatever, and then change your behaviour so that that doesn't happen anymore. And electric cars are not the answer to that. When I say electric cars are not the answer, what I mean by that is, while they're battery powered, they are not the answer. Now, of course, there's many other things they could be powered by, with water, and some people are working on hydrogen vehicles, of course, and that, of course, would be better for the environment. You know, there's a whole area of technology called supercapacitors. If they use them instead of batteries in their car, that would be better for the environment. But unfortunately, most of these bigger companies are making huge amounts of money out of these batteries. And, you know, while that's the case, then electric cars are not going to be the solution that humankind believe they would be. In fact, they're just going to cause more degradation to the environment. Going to Mars isn't the solution either. Because while we go to Mars, we're destroying the environment on Earth to get there. We're using all these resources from Earth to get there. So that's not very wise.
Is it even possible?
Sorry?
Is it even possible to have a sustainable environment in Mars?
Well, it depends whether you say a sustainable one or one. Like a sustainable one, probably not, is the answer to that, obviously. You know, there's no atmosphere there. There's no, you know, there's a reason why we're on Earth and not on Mars already. Now, of course, I understand the whole science thing of it, and it's lovely to do, you know, you learn a lot by doing a project like that, but not at the expense of destroying a large amount of this environment to do it, you know. It's also driven by people who don't believe in an afterlife. So they're worried that all humanity at some point that they're going to get hit by an asteroid and then all humanity will be destroyed. I'm not worried about such things. I know there's many other, when I say many, there's at least 6 other Earths that I've seen. So humanity can't be destroyed, and also God created humanity, so at the end it's not going to get destroyed either for that reason. So even if this sun went supernova and the Earth got completely destroyed in the process and all of us died, none of us would be destroyed. Right? So I don't worry about such things. And I know God doesn't either. Yeah. But humans who do often do some pretty dangerous things or damaging things to the environment that we're living on in order to try to overcome their fears. None of which are good. So there's degrees, isn't there, of things that we do that are damaging. The biggest damage we cause is due to our soul condition.
You kind of give up hope that there is a better answer, like in terms of, especially in terms of environment. It's like, well, there's so many things that are against me taking,
True.
No, I don't know, so I think we're just talking to your sin right now. Because, I don't know, it's like you don't want to deal with the moral and spiritual issues, and then you look to the environment and go, well, what can we do? But
obviously, if you fix your moral and spiritual,
those things, then there'll be
you see a mountain of things you can do.
Of things that you won't even think, oh, should I do it? I could do it. You'd be like, I want to do it. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's often when you sort of, I guess what I'm saying is you can get a bit addicted to hopelessness as an excuse to get away from dealing with things that will actually create options.
Yeah, what we've learnt in the things we've done with God's way is that it's quite easy to fix environments.
Like God's creation is so geared towards regeneration.
Yeah.
It's just that we act so against it, As soon as you start doing even little things, or you just leave it alone, it already starts regenerating.
But unfortunately, you can't really do that with how much you've damaged it already.
Love wouldn't just cause you to leave it alone. It would cause you to want to do things, and then as soon as you start putting inputs in, all the processes are there to keep furthering that, so things can happen more quickly.
When you choose to love, like you're going to love, you'll love God, you'll love your partner, you'll love children, you'll love people generally, you'll love animals, you'll love birds, you'll love the environment, you'll love creation. And none of these loves are exclusive to each other. You'll find actually that you can still love your partner and love God and love creation and love the environment and also do some things you love. A lot of people worry that, but if I do this, then I'll no longer get the thing I love. Now, when it comes to things like coffee and tea and chocolate, you guys don't love them. You're addicted to them. You don't love them. If you loved them, you probably wouldn't do a lot of the things you do with them anymore, because you couldn't, because you love them too much to do it. If you loved the environment, you wouldn't allow a lot of things to occur anymore. So most people don't understand the impact of love on their lives on a practical manner. They sort of see love as sort of like a philosophy rather than practical. And this is something we notice a lot, and this is something that the God's Way organisation in Australia is trying to change with people who come, to see how practical loving something turns out to be. An example of that is that you can use a bulldozer to destroy huge amounts of land. In Australia, what they used to do, and what they still do in some places, is they get 2 very, very big bulldozers with these big chains that are about this high. Chains. Between them about 100 metres apart, so that's about 300 feet apart from each other. And they just get one bulldozer on one end and one bulldozer on another and just go through a whole heap of land, just clearing everything. And then what they do is pile it up in a big pile and burn it. So everything you get acres and acres of land destroyed in a day. hundreds of acres, thousands of acres of land destroyed in a day. When I was a child, we used to watch these huge fires, where I'm talking fires that are like the size of, well, like your entire Bay Area here, fire, and all just burning of slash that's been pulled together by these huge bulldozers in order to clear land for mostly for cropping for animal production, for meat. And you know, over the course of my childhood, there was whole areas of where I grew up where the mallee, what's called the mallee, is not there anymore. All of this natural environment not there anymore. It's just all sand dunes now. It's all deserts now. Because it only took they had 20 years of productivity, and then it became a desert. Now, that's what you can do with a bulldozer. You can also regenerate the land with a bulldozer. And we, in God's Way, we own a bulldozer. It's a 22-ton bulldozer, a Caterpillar it's called. And we've used it to create terraces in land that had nothing growing on them at all. There was no, for 12 years there had been nothing growing on them, not any blade of grass or anything, just bare dirt. And then what we did was we bulldozed these terraces in, we designed them a certain way, and now there's trees like 6 metres high to 10 metres high, right, in those locations after 6 years it took to do that. It's obviously a fair bit of funds to do it, because it required effort. We had to get a driver and all that kind of stuff to educate the driver. Mary and I, and Eloisa in particular, were involved mostly in the project. I designed the project, and myself and Eloisa mostly did all the work on the ground. And there's pictures on the God's Way website. You'll see there's pictures of before, after. And we're still taking pictures of after, just to show what's happened to it. But that's using a bulldozer, which is capable of doing all of that destruction, can now also be used to recover the destruction. So humans have got, if you've got the will to get things done, you'll get things done. Most of you don't realise it, but up until recently, about a quarter of the donations we've received all went on the environment, all went on environmental projects, and all different ways that in Australia they're still logging, they're still taking down all these trees for hardwood, and they cut them all up, and then there's all these offcuts, and they get piled into these huge piles, and huge piles bigger than this room, like twice as big as this room, 3 times as big as this room, piles about double the height of this room, and they like put a match to it and light the whole thing.
That's at the local mill.
That's at the mills.
So we started a project where we would buy they gave us all of that, but we had to buy the trucking and
to get it all out for their property.
To get it away, because every year they burn.
Every year they're burning that amount, every single year.
Just in our local area, which is pretty.
And so we started a project where we get it from them and mulch it, and then use it to recover the land. Now that's been a very expensive project, and some people have donated towards that project quite consistently over the past few years in God's Way. It's a God's Way project. But when you look at it, otherwise all this carbon's going up in the atmosphere, all these trees, like all it's being burned for no reason. It's just with no benefit whatsoever. But now that a lot of it's decomposing, there's this like the wildlife and the trees and we're going nuts with it, you know, like, so we're using it to recover the land, to produce things. So if you love, you come up with ways you can love. You understand? And you will do that in your own life. You'll come up with ways you can love. And if you love people, you do the same. You'll come up with ways you can love them. And if you love the environment, you'll come up with ways you can love it. And you'll also reduce the ways you don't love it, right? That's a natural consequence of what you become more loving will do. So substantially, if your heart doesn't change, you won't think of doing those things. You just go, oh, it's all pointless anyway. What's the point of doing it? Everybody else is doing the opposite anyway. So I might as well participate in what everybody else is doing anyway. What's the point of me doing something different when other people are doing all the same things, destroying it? So an example of that is we're doing these projects, and about 40 or 50 kilometres away from us, they went through one property. It was over 14,000 acres of land, and they cleared every tree with bulldozers. And so you can look at that and go, what's the point of us doing our little project that's only a few hundred acres when down the road there's someone clearing 14,000 acres? Well, you don't think that way when you love. You go, I'm going to do it, whether I'm going to do what they can, even if they don't want to do it. And also you look at the cause of why they did it. They did the entire thing for cattle. So that's because of meat. That's because of eating meat. So anybody eating meat is participating in that. You follow? So the best thing I can do is not eat meat anymore. That's participating in that. You can imagine if all of the entire earth we decided not to eat. The entire earth. Now, all the clearing that's going on for cattle farming, there'd be no point to it. Because nobody's going to buy it. That would instantly stop the whole thing if all of us could do that. So most of us are not even looking at the ramifications of our unloving behaviour. And part of our unloving behaviour is hopelessness. Many of you feel hopeless. When you look at what's going on around you, many of you feel hopeless. But that's actually an unloving emotion.
It's actually anger.
It's actually anger. And it's anger at other people. Which is not very righteous, really, because if you look at your own history, you've done things to participate in the destruction of the earth. So you can see if people are not as aware as you are now, then of course they might still be doing such things. Of course, education is the important thing. How many of you have been willing to get up in front of an audience and say, meat eating is wrong morally?
You're going to get so attacked.
And that's why many of you don't do it. Right? But Mary and I get attacked every day for what we do. Well, why not see it as, well, it's great. Because if you can get in front of people and educate them, then it's another group of people that get educated. Now, there's a way to educate, and that is just not telling them off and saying things, but showing them the damage, showing them what's actually going on in the world. And not just the whole animal thing in terms of how hard they're being to the animals, you know, not just the way animals are killed, you know, like the, what's that documentary that showed how Earthlings or something?
Yes.
You know, those kind of documentaries are not educational really, because they don't include everything. They don't include all the damage being done to the environment, you know, the plants and the animals and the native species of an environment. They don't include any of that. They just focus on how we're treating the animals, right? Whereas I would prefer to see something done, how you're treating the entire environment. And you educate people, you show, here's an environment before we started using it for meat, here's the environment afterwards. Here's what's happening clearing-wise, here's before, here's afterwards. Here's what's going on in terms of the destruction, in terms of the burning of all the plants that are being destroyed. Here's afterwards. Here's the measurement of the native species in that area beforehand, and here's the measurement afterwards. And if you're prepared to gather that data, do whatever is needed to do to share that data with people, people will want you'll be on a worldwide public speaking tour forever if you wanted to be, like sharing that information, because there's people all over the world who after a while will go, wow, this is amazing information and we need to share this and make sure that's distributed. But when you feel hopeless, you don't do any of that.
No point in taking action.
No point in taking action.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I was drawing your attention to earlier.
That's right.
Yeah.
Interdiction, that's Mary put it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in saying there's no point in taking action, you're now never going to be that person who actually collects all that data and shares it. And someone else in the world is going to have to be for something to change. Somebody else in the world's going to have to collect all that data and share it. If you're not going to do it, and you're aware, it's not going to be anyone who's not aware. It's going to have to be someone who's aware, and then they're willing to go and do that work, and then share it with passion around the world. It's going to have to be somebody who knows and wants to and desires to and does it because they love. Right? Now, like I said, there's so many opportunities to love on this earth because it's in such a bad place. There's a lot you can do to love it. You know, if you were in the celestial heavens, it would be less, you know, everything's already loved, you know, so much. And when you go there, you go, everything is fantastic. What can I do to improve it? It's hard to improve it. But here on earth, there's a lot to improve, and there's a lot of ways you can demonstrate your love for people, and there's a lot, you know, people in terms of, there's children who need love. You know, there's all these children who are fostered out, that come from abusive families, they all need love. And then there's also there's the environment that needs love, you know, and there's generally people who need love. There's all sorts of systems that need more love. And there's so much opportunity to love. But the average one of us go, oh, it's all too hard and nobody wants it really. And oh, people will attack me if I do it. And all that is just excuses to not feel something. So that's a lack of humility. If you understood the principle that there's a lot you can love, and once you develop a desire to love it, can you see there's so much opportunity of what you can do with your life? And if you do it, many of you will become experts in that field just through doing, because nobody else is doing it. And people will want to hear from you, and they'll want to say, you know, what do we do here? What do we do there? And because you've actually done something yourself, and you understand what's involved in doing it, you'll be able to share with them what to do. And get programs happening all around the world that illustrate the truth of, if you love something, that it improves. Yeah. Okay.
Just piggybacking off what you were saying, it just sucks that we live in a society where it's a lot easier to accept you to be unloving, and there's so much pushback to do something.
Yes, it's not. What about your business?
Well, because say for example, like with money issues, right? Like say if it costs you $20 to take a loving action, people would rather just spend nothing and just not care about it. When it comes to my business, it's funny because
see, I don't even know if I agree with that first statement. If you are a loving person, you'd be willing to spend $20 to take a loving action.
Okay, I'm saying that society, there's so much pushback from society to...
But if they...
Is it pushback? Or is it just that nobody considers it?
Yeah.
See, there's a difference between pushback and nobody considering. Like, Mary and I get pushback, which is like death threats, pushback, right? That's pushback. Then there's just times when we meet with people and nobody's even thought about it. And then when you talk to them about it, they go, oh, I've never thought about that. And that's not pushback, that's just a lack of awareness, or what you classify as ignorance.
And I think also, change, you know, you see what I call this sort of, well, it doesn't matter what I call it, but, you know, you see a lot of people who think, oh my gosh, it's hopeless, the world's in a mess, and then someone comes up and goes, here, give us $20 to sponsor a child in Africa, and they're like, here, take my money, you know, because they feel like, I want to do something and I don't know what to do, and, you know, it feels so bad and maybe this will help, or I'll feel better is really what they feel. They haven't really thought about what would actually help, but I think that if there were people who are willing to lead in love, willing to educate, like Jesus said, and say, actually the really loving thing to do here would be this and this and this, and here are some options, and here's what I've done, and if you want to join in, here's how you could. I think a lot of people wouldn't push back so much on that.
That's right.
You know, I think a lot of people wouldn't push back on us if it wasn't for who we were.
Yeah.
You know, because I think people are pretty hungry for
truth
generally. Like, people generally like truth, and they like people being truthful, even if they do sometimes get upset. over time, if you're consistently truthful with someone, they come to understand, oh, that's a good thing. I know that I'm going to get the truth from that person. So I don't know if there's pushback on truly loving things, except where people's, I don't know. You know, people have got addictions, they want to hold on to them for sure. But I think if we're talking
but
about...
if you educate a person about how their addiction is harming themselves and harming the environment, harming their own children, at the end of the day, once you've educated them in that manner, can you see that the average person will go, oh yeah, that's right, you know, like, what do I do about this, you know? The average person is just doesn't know what to do and has never given it much thought about how to learn what to do either. And was also, because of their addictions, unwilling to do it by themselves.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. I think families push back on their family members who want to change.
Yeah.
I think that is really prevalent.
Yeah.
And I think when people then don't work through the emotions of that, then they're addicted to everyone agreeing. They want the agreement of everyone before they take loving leadership. And
basically, you want people to love you before you love them.
Yeah.
If you can work through that, then I don't think it's as hard as you think, because you're not checking in, how does everyone feel about me? Do mum and dad approve? You know, I can't cope if I don't have everyone's approval.
My support mechanism.
And then you take the leadership action, and then you find people are drawn to that. But it's that working through that initial thing, I think, that most people never do, which is why they want to get, we see this all the time as well, like people want to get together and say, oh, there's this really good thing that we could do, do you want to do it with me? And do you want to do it with me? And will you do it with me? And will you do it with me? And then it never works out well because you haven't worked through the basic addiction, which is to have approval, which really comes from your family.
And have agreement of everyone.
And what Mary was talking about with my business, I do see that with some customers. They're like really resistant to it at first. Like, what do you do? This is so dumb, man. But then they keep coming and they're like, oh, this is actually really cool.
That's right. So for the sake of everyone else here, Cheng runs a business where you do sushi.
Yeah,
vegan sushi. Sells it at markets.
By
And he doesn't sell it, he does it by donation. Which is, by the way, not the same as a gift yet, but almost there, right? And your business is, you thought at the beginning it wouldn't be successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is successful enough for you two to live.
Yeah, it's
for both of you.
Yeah, for both of us. Yeah, so I get a lot of pushback from other vendors, like, what are you doing? You know, this is dumb. Like, you guys aren't going to work out. And then I'm still in business, and they're not.
They're gone. Yeah, they're gone.
And they constantly try to rebrand and do something else.
That's right.
Like, we feel like a lot of other vendors like don't like us for doing this. Also.
Yeah.
So
That's true.
We feel those projections
Because they have the same fears as you used to have.
Yeah.
Because their fear is if I don't charge something, I won't get properly paid and so forth, which is just their fear as well. It's not even true. If you provide a good product for free, eventually people will come along and say, I want to help you do that.
Yes.
Eventually that's how it's going to work.
Yeah. So going back, I do get more help than people not helping. Yeah, more support.
Yeah, and this is also what I see, and I was like this in the past as well. You hear the loudest the people who are attacking, rather than see the full picture, which is, oh, actually there's a lot of people who want my product or who support what I'm doing or are interested in this idea, but we just, because we haven't worked through feelings, we focus on the people who are disagreeing or pushing back.
An example of that for us is we've probably received over the years 10,000 emails or letters of support. At least that.
Probably.
Much more than that, probably. We've probably received about 1,500 death threats. Right? Now, if you compare the death threats with the letters of support, it's like 1/10. Now, if we focus on the death threats and say, oh, it's all too hard because of the death threats, you know, it's all too hard, there's too much pushback, and we don't focus on all the people where the support, can you see our priority system is warped? and this is the case for many of us in the world, is where our priority system is so warped that one person opposing us we feel devastated by, when there might be 20 people helping us. You know, and so we've got our priority systems all out of whack. You know, but can't see there's, you know, quite often, as Mary said, the people who attack are the loudest, and the people who support are not necessarily so loud. And so you have a tendency then to focus on the attack rather than the support, right? But if you look at things from a whole perspective, and a logical one, you can see, wow, there's far more support than there is attack. So even if there was just all attack, let's say every single letter we got, every single email we got was just attack. The question I've still got to ask myself is, am I doing something loving? And if it's loving, I should still do it to the best of my ability.
Yeah. Going off that, that's why I remember like a quote that you said that always sticks with me is, you can live in this world but not be of this world.
Yeah.
And that one like really sticks with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah.
And that's what you is required if you want to. I always think of it like leading in love. You know, you have to step away. You have to break away from the world. If the world is unloving, if you're going to lead in love, you have to be in it but not of it, until enough people change, and then you're in it again, but it's in a different condition. And this is why Jesus and I have been talking about principles so much on this trip, because really you need to make the decision to live by loving principles if you're going to reach that state. A lot of the time everyone's getting caught up in their feelings and emotions and sort of using that as an excuse not to live by principle, rather than like what we were saying to Anna before, well, have your feelings and keep being principled.
Do you have a list of the things? I know we talked about free will, be self, and the last one. But I was just wondering if there is a full list of things that you recommend.
When we did the group on God's loving laws in 2016, we did a bunch of outlines, and in those outlines there's a lot of the principles and explanations of the principles that are defined. Yeah. They're good ones to start with anyway.
When you guys are talking about doing different loving things in the world, how do you know where to start? Or like, is it based on, or what? Because there's so many things to do. I feel like I have this feeling you have to dedicate my time to one thing, I guess. So is it based on your own personal desire, where you want to go, like what's the priority?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be certain things that you feel more drawn to initially, isn't there? You don't want to limit yourself to one thing, but it is, like, in order to really give something a shot, you do have to commit probably to one project initially, especially if you acknowledge that in doing this you're going to refine your own understanding of principle, of love, truth, humility. Because you know you're not perfect now, but if you feel like I have a loving aspiration and I feel I want to act in this direction, for example, and then you engage with that, if you're going to do it humbly, you're going to understand, well, in this process, I'm going to learn a lot more about how to express loving desire and how to live by principle. So I would choose one that you feel drawn to, and realise, well, I might get halfway into this and go, oh, this was wrong. You know, I've got to refine. Don't abandon. I've got to refine. I've got to change tack, whatever it is. And you might do that many times, or you might find, this is pretty solid. You'd want to feel like it's pretty solid before you start. Like, you want to give it reflection. You want to work through as much of like the understanding of how this is going to be loving and help the world, you'd want to feel like it's not just, oh, I'll take a shot. It's, no, I think it's worthy. But then understand you're going to refine that as you go. And then if you do that one thing really solidly and refine it, then you've got more capacity, you can see, to do multiple things at once, because you've learned so much spiritually in that process.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you also consider like God's priority system, or is it?
Yes.
Yeah, so like helping people is like the top of the environment.
Yeah, for sure. And that's going to bring the most benefit to the other things down in the hierarchy, which is why you think about those things. So when it comes to helping people, like if I help people well, then that will benefit the environment. Whereas if I just help the environment, people may or may not be benefited, but it'll be second, like
They might continue doing the same things they currently do to destroy the environment.
and so yeah. And then if I'm helping people, am I going to help them spiritually, emotionally, sexually, or physically? If I just help them physically, well, then possibly, potentially, or probably, all the spiritual and emotional and sexual problems they're having that create the physical hardship, that will still go on. So I'd be better to aim up in the hierarchy there as well.
Yeah.
Just kind of what you guys are doing.
That's right.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that being said, sometimes you can illustrate things with physical data that can then take the person at their belief level. So an example of that is, let's say, the belief level on the planet with regard to food is that we all need meat, right? That's the belief. But if you can provide data that disproves that, and data that also proves the damage that it's doing to the environment, then you see the average person would look at all that data and go, wow, there's a lot of data there that says that's actually not right to do that. And even the people who don't necessarily have not necessarily changed their beliefs may still change their actions to support that new loving premise because of the data. So sometimes you've got to create data as well as share the truth. So that you've got some scientific evidence about the course of action that needs to be taken.
Yeah, and document what you do. You document it so it's not just then your experience, it's something that other people can gain from. Even so, say you're doing a project, I don't know, with mothers and babies, for example, and you decide, oh, I want to really help in this area, and it might encompass physical and sexual health as well as maybe some spiritual things or emotional things. I've got this project in mind. So you might run that with 50 mothers and babies over a year. But if you don't document what you did, what you learned, then it's only going to potentially benefit those mothers and babies. Whereas if you document it, you can share it with other people much more easily. And you create data, as Jesus said, but it also creates a resource that other people who have a similar desire can come to and learn from and build upon and repeat.
Yeah. Because in the end, anything you choose to do that's loving, in harmony with love, if you think about it, anything you choose to do would be like more beneficial than if more people could be involved in doing it than just you. So it's great to put together information in such a way where other people can replicate it and therefore share in it. So this is where being special is not good, because if you've got an addiction to be special, you'll want to keep all that to yourself rather than just share it willingly. You notice with Mary and I, pretty much all the time we are providing information to people all the time, and we don't copyright it in the sense that we don't, it's all free, so anybody can use it and anybody can reuse it. And there are some people even misusing that by charging for it after we've provided it for free. But that's their injury, isn't it? So we don't want to control that even. But the more you can do for free and the more you can document it and the more you can help people come to understand things, the more they can then share the same information and add to that information and so forth. So it ends up creating its own momentum.
It does. And if you're really humble and you're learning spiritual lessons and moral lessons through the process and you document all that as well, that is so beneficial to other people who are sincere, because they can learn from your mistakes. A lot of people
learn
don't
from
want
the feelings you have.
Yeah, understand a lot of deeper principles. A lot of people also don't want to share that because they're worried about how they'll be perceived or what.
So
people might look down on me if they realise I was jealous or if I had this or that. But if you work through it, it can really help others.
Yeah, you look at most of the things that are done where people provide information, it's all very polished and it's all very like manicured.
And I'm the expert.
It's a bit like many of your lawns here. They're not even lawns. They're like fake plastic. You know what I mean? And so it's all very, and the trouble with that is that it then doesn't look real to people. The key is that it needs to be real as well, like not manicured, not faked up, but actually warts and all real, you know. So all the problems as well as all the successes, you know. Then, you know, most of you would know if you've ever built a house that there's a whole heap of things to avoid doing as well as that you should do. And if you just present what you did do and there's the result, and you don't present all the things you should avoid doing, then you can see at the end of the day the average person is going to think, oh, well, I'll do something different to that, I'll do this, and not realise the damage or that may occur by them doing it. And so it's really good to provide information in its full form, in the sense of how what failures you had as well as what successes you had. What's the time?
Yeah, it must be time. Yeah.
Yep, you guys are now 15 minutes in arrears with it.
Mike, did you just move? Did I dream that?
You did.
Yeah, I plugged in. My battery's getting low.
Yeah, and so this is about, for us, about as long as we probably want to go today, because we've got a fairly full day prepping tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but we wanted to take this opportunity to just have a more informal chat with you, right? Because it's sometimes handy. People feel a bit less stressed out usually.
Did that happen?
I don't know. Many of you are pretty stressed out.
Pretty worried about being yourselves, it seems like, most of you. Yeah, very.
This image consciousness that's here is a pretty big thing, isn't it? Like, because when people are so image conscious, they're not. You're not able to ask the questions you really want to ask, and you're not able to make the statements you really want to make, and things like that. So, just for the sake of our next visit.
Or Friday, for those
Or
of you
Friday.
just like practice at home in the mirror. I'm just going to blurt out whatever. I'm not going to practice the question 17 times while the microphone's coming to me. I'm just going to say, Jesus, I'm really worried about this.
Yeah. It's better to be more straightforward and honest with how you feel, because you can then learn a lot in that process, right?
Yeah. And have more feelings, and gives people the opportunity to know you as well, and to feel you.
Yeah.
I like all of you guys. You know, it's like, but at the moment it's sort of like liking people through their smoke screen. You know, it's like, I see you behind there. That's how I feel. See you and I like you, if you don't want to show me.
I mean, this weekend when you do there, just take the opportunity to be more real with yourself and more real with everyone around you, including all the other participants too, you know. Including the things like every time you're bored with a conversation, I'm bored with this conversation. Just practice doing this, you know, just get. You know, everyone here's been educated a little bit with regard to that. That's what we should be doing. So experiment with it. I'm sick of this conversation. Let's move on. Yeah, experiment with the truth with them and see how that works out. You know, what kind of depth of getting to know each other you can have when you do that.
You know, when it comes to your partner.
Especially, like, isn't that one of the most important relationships you have? Like, so naturally you want to put more effort into being real with your partner than anyone else. Yeah. So the ones you live with every day. Yeah. Okay, well, we're probably going to have to tidy up this space a bit, aren't we?
Yeah.
So we probably need to.
I think I'd like to sweep the floor if I can find a broom or a few.
Yeah, we have a couple of rooms, and I was gonna plan a block after everyone leaves.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Now, in terms of if you want to donate for the space as well, maybe if we give our donations to Chief, so that he can give us a column.
We're gonna shake rice before we do.
Does that sound all right with you? Does. And yeah, we'll get started with tidying it all up and everything.
Yeah, and we'll just put so obviously we'll clean up, we'll sweep the floors, clean up the food here, and then put the tables and chairs back the way they were.